Ogres are terrifying creatures for many reasons, and not just the ones you might think. First and foremost, they are known for their legendary stupidity. Few ogres can count to 10, even with all their fingers in front of them. They speak only a rudimentary form of their own language and common. Their iron guts and insatiable appetites allow them to eat almost anything. To ogres, vegetables are seen as medicine. They are carnivorous creatures mainly, and especially prefer the taste of dwarves, halflings, and elves. But it is their ferocious temper that truly sets ogres apart. At the slightest offense, an ogre's rage ignites, leading to a violent tantrum until everything around them is smashed to pieces. Unfortunately, for the average commoner, this means that even minor actions, such as bumping into them, jabbing, prodding, laughing, making faces, or even just looking at them the wrong way, can incite their wrath. Despite their fearsome temperaments, what makes ogres truly terrifying is their sheer numbers. They are the lowest rung of the ordering, the social structure to which all giants adhere, yes, making them in theory inferior to the truly large giants, like hill and frost giants that could devastate a village or town shed in minutes. However, ogres are far more common. You're 10 times more likely to encounter an ogre than a true giant, and their rampant breeding means you might face more than one. In the seedier cities of the world that tolerate them, ogres are a frequent sight, and their presence is a constant source of unease to the populace. But on the open road, they are even deadlier. Imagine a band of hungry ogres catching wind of a farmstead cooking supper in the distance, deciding to wander into the hapless farmer's abode. Their belongings, livestock, pets, and lives are all but forfeit. If enough of a victim remains after it's gorged itself, it might make a loincloth from the quarry's skin, and a necklace from its leftover bones. This is the height of ogre's culture. When working with other creatures with malevolent intent, like orcs, hobgoblins, or even some of the more terrifying beings of the Forgotten Realms, such as beholders and dragons, ogres become an even more formidable foe, acting as the muscle that never questions loyalty. They will follow anyone into battle as long as their payment is in food, coin, or a weapon that's forged for their size. This makes them a valuable asset to their higher-ranking giant cousins as well. Because ogres aren't as big as true giants, this allows them to fit into places that larger giantkin can't, to flush out the fleeing or hiding creatures. Whether alone or in collaboration, ogres are a relentless and terrifying force driven by their insatiable hunger and brutal nature. With all of this in mind, let's take a look at the 2014 stat block and see what we can do better. Alright, so jumping in to the 2014 stat block for the ogre, I think it's very apparent that we can see that he, much like his much larger cousins, falls victim to the template-esque stat block that the other giants have, which is no special traits, no abilities, nothing that really sets them apart from an orc or a goblin. The ogre doesn't use its size to its advantage in any sort of way. We're just going to go through that block really quick from top to bottom. We got a large giant, chaotic evil, armor class of 11, they wear hide armor typically, hit points of 59, a speed of 40 feet, which is kind of funny that they have the same speed as a full-size giant, which almost makes me want to go back and give all my giants 10 more movement speed. We have a strength of 19, 8 dexterity, 16 con, 5 intelligence, which is hilarious, 7 wisdom, 7 charisma. I think the ability scores are great. I think those are actually really lore friendly to the creature, to its credit. We have a dark vision of 60 feet. We have the languages of common and giant, but remember when I read the lore, they barely speak common and giant to a cohesive, comprehensible standard. They have a challenge rating of 2, proficiency bonus of 2. They have 2 different attacks that they can do, a ranged attack and a melee attack, a great club and a javelin, and that is it. So unfortunately, the ogre is basically a template stat block, yelling, jumping off the screen, shouting, fix me, add stuff to it. So we're going to do that to our ogre here. They are big dumb brutes. They need to be big dumb brutes in a more fun way. So let's get into my stat block and see what I did differently. Starting off with our ogre that we have improved upon, we are going to fly right through the ability scores, HP, speed, saving throws, and skills because I did not add or change anything to these. So we have AC of 18, 59 hit points, 40 speed, same ability scores, same senses, same languages, same challenge rating. None of those changed. But once we get down to the special traits section of my stat card, we do see a couple changes. So, under special traits, the first one you will notice is Legendary Stupidity, and this is taken straight out of the monster manual. This should have been on the stat block to begin with, but the ogre has disadvantage on intelligence checks and intelligence saving throws. There are beasts in the world of Dungeons & Dragons that have higher intelligence than the ogres do. The ogres are supposed to be representative of, essentially, baby's first giant fight. These are what your introduction to a giant should be as a low-level adventurer. Most people want to look at hill giants and say those are the first ones, but I don't think it should be. I think it should be an ogre, but the reason why people don't choose ogres is because their stat block is very boring, and they tend to just be another horde enemy when they have a little bit more to them based on what I've read out of their wiki and my monster manual here. But anyways, let's move on to the second and final special trait that they have that I gave them. This is a fun one in my opinion. I love random charts because I think they kind of keep me on my toes, but they also give flavor to the creature. So I kind of took this from the mouth of Grolnator, or Grolantor. The ogre, this is called short temper. The ogre is easily provoked and has a volatile temper. When subjected to an insult, bad joke, strange facial expression, or any perceived slight, particularly if it involves food or its desire for it, the ogre must use all its movement towards the source of its anger and roll a d6, consulting the table below. And you can see here we have on the 1 to 2, the ogre makes a great club or slam attack. If the target is a creature smaller than the ogre, it must succeed on a DC 14 strength save or be knocked prone. If the target is out of reach, the ogre smashes the ground and nearby objects until the end of its turn, so it essentially breaks out into a tantrum. On a 3 to 4, the ogre makes a great club or slam attack. If the target is out of reach, the ogre throws a javelin at it, or if it's unable to do that, it then again smashes the ground and nearby objects until the end of its turn. So it's throwing a fit because it can't get to the source of its anger. Now this works for objects as well, so if an ogre is faced with like a wooden fence that they need to get through and they can't think of a way around, this is something that would cause their short temper to go off. Now moving to number 5, the ogre makes a great club attack. If the target is out of reach, the ogre uses the dash action towards it, taking the most direct route possible, still provoking opportunity attacks. So this is like the bard from across the room saying very mean things about the ogre's smelly breath, and the ogre decides to take it upon himself to charge recklessly through his allies to get to him in the back, where he is shouting insults from across the room, using vicious mockery and other sorts of spells. I think this is representative of how an ogre should behave. Number 6. The ogre makes a great club attack. If the target is out of reach, the ogre gains advantage on all attack rolls until the end of its next turn, and then throws a javelin if able. So that's going to conclude the special traits section. I believe short temper should have been on the stat block to begin with. Now this does make the stat block a bit more intimidating to look at from a first glance, but if you look at the abilities, a good stat block should run itself. You shouldn't have to think too much about it if you don't want to really get too in depth in the tactics of the creature. The stat block should autopilot itself for you in a way. Moving into the actions category. we have a large great club, spiked. So I kind of took this from Baldur's Gate 3. I'm kind of sick of seeing every large creature just using a great club and doing bludgeoning damage, so gave him a large great club and I made it spiked. So it does 2d8 piercing damage instead of 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. He still has a javelin. Now I also aptly named each of the weapons large because the creature is large, so his weapons are large. That is why they deal, instead of 1 die of damage, they deal 2 dies worth of damage. This will help newer dungeon masters kind of understand that, I believe. Large javelin, same javelin, it's just large in its name, and it does 2d6 piercing damage on a hit. Here's where the first unique ability comes in with Bear Hug. It's a melee attack, +6 to hit, reach 5 feet. One creature smaller than the ogre can be targeted with this, so you can't target a bigger creature. On a hit, the ogre does 2d4 plus 4 bludgeoning damage, and the target is grappled. While grappling the target this way, the target is restrained, and the ogre cannot make other melee weapon attacks or use Bear Hug on a different target. The ogre can only make Bear Hug or bite attacks while grappling, so he's got both of his arms around the creature. He can't swing his weapon or throw javelins without letting go of the creature, essentially, is why it's worded that way. We have a slam attack. This is in case somebody would make him drop his weapon. It definitely drops his damage down significantly from an average hit of 13 down to an 11. So this just does 2d6 bludgeoning damage on a hit. Now here's where we move into the bonus actions section of this stat card, and I believe this is where the creature really comes alive and it's really fun. So we got Ogre's Mark. I stole this from Baldur's Gate 3, but I made my own changes to it based on the ogre lore. So, the ogre designates a creature as its next meal by marking it with a slobbering, hungry gaze. The marked creature has disadvantage on saving throws to avoid being grappled by the ogre, so essentially, if it bear hugs, you're not going to be able to break out as easily, because the ogre is hungry and he wants to eat you. If the ogre is fighting a dwarf, halfling, or elf, it must mark one of these races as its next meal. The ogre progresses towards its marked target. If the ogre progresses towards its marked target and it's obstructed by other creatures, and as an example I put, it takes opportunity attacks or otherwise the creatures prevent it from reaching the target that it's marked as its meal, the ogre has to roll on the short-tempered table. So, they're gluttonous. Mark shows their gluttony, meaning they decide that they want to eat that creature and they start moving towards it, and if other creatures start impeding its movement with like sentinel or getting in its way so it can't move through them, the ogre gets very angry and it has to roll on short temper. And then we have the final ability of our ogre's bonus actions. This is the coup de grace ability, so to speak. It doesn't deal more damage than its other weapons, but you'll see it's flavorful. So, this is a bite attack. The ogre cannot use it unless he is grappling a creature with Bear Hug. And on a hit, he does 2d6 piercing damage, but the target must make a wisdom saving throw or become frightened of the ogre for 1 minute. A frightened target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, with disadvantage if the target is marked and the ogre is within line of sight. So, this is representative of the ogre sees you from across the room. He starts salivating. He decides, "Elf is my next food," and begins running across the room at you. You, understanding what's happening, decide to stay there and try and fight him. Well, he comes up, he bear hugs you, and then he starts eating you alive. You're gonna be terrified of him when that happens. So I feel like this is what the ogre stat block should have been, and that is why I believe I fixed the ogre stat block. As we wrap up our exploration of ogres and their ferocious yet intriguing nature, it's worth noting that there is a broader truth about Dungeons & Dragons that I think many dungeon masters, especially new ones, might overlook. Lower challenge rating creatures like the ogre being ran as is from the books, while that approach works, I believe tweaking these creatures based on their lore can truly bring them to life. As you've seen from our stat block, even the most mundane creature like an ogre can be made memorable if you just give them a few unique behaviors or quirks without really looking at the additional context or flavor like the artwork. If you took the basic stat block and you took away the artwork and just looked at it as a player who's never played Dungeons & Dragons before or a fantasy game, you would have no idea that this creature is any different from an orc, because it doesn't do anything different from an orc or a goblin. It doesn't show that it's bigger than you. One thing that I like about Baldur's Gate 3 is it really opened my eyes to actually how big the ogres were compared to you. They are large creatures, but they're tall and they're stocky, flabby, and fat. They have an imposing size that I kind of got inspiration for just by looking at them through artwork and things like that, and I made them stand out because of it. Crafting a creature thoughtfully and carefully can make pretty much any creature become more than just a stepping stone in your campaigns. When you make a creature memorable, your players will recall those moments for years to come, like the time James nearly became an ogre's lunch because of their taste for elf flesh. These encounters are far more engaging than just simply ogre hits with great club attack. So, the next time you're designing a low CR creature, remember, they're not just minor obstacles, they're potential gold mines of creativity and excitement. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is DM Dungeon Mastery, and keep your adventures full of surprises.